Okay, so it looks like we're live. We're here to talk about the future of OB, outside broadcast. I've got Daragh from NEP. We've got Hamish from CTV. And we've been talking, we'll move on to Daniel very shortly because he has video to show us. We're basically going to be, as we've heard a lot about today, talking about remote production and how that's affecting outside broadcast. And Timeline have got a little video that they've put together about all the remote work that they've been doing during lockdown. So that is what we're going to look at now. Okay, roll VT. Okay, thank you for that. Daniel, obviously for the past few months, well, for the past few years in OBs, we've been using remote production. And it's something we've got really used to in our world, but obviously the pandemic has expedited the use and made it, the way to be doing outside broadcast at the moment. So do you want to tell us a bit about how that's affected Timeline and what's been going on this year?
Yeah, thanks and hello. We've in that video there you saw quite a lot of different remote production that we've been doing, and during the height of the first lockdown we had to move to a model where everyone was working from home, and I think a few people have talked about that today. And we designed systems to allow the whole production to work from home. So you saw there the vision mixer was at home, the sound person was at home, graphics, EVS operators, and there was very, very few people in the broadcast center. Now that we're into, we're kind of out of that phase, and we're now into more traditional remote working. We've kind of got two remote working models that we've developed at Timeline. One is remote control of an OB truck. We'll see where you send a traditional OB truck to site and everything is on site. So the vision mixer, all the equipment is on site, but people can operate it remotely from a remote work center. And the other mode of remote production that we've used a lot is where all the signals are sent back to the broadcast center. So we have a very small truck on site, and we bring back all of the camera signals, and the clip you saw there of the EPL where they were presenting on site, all of that production was being done back at BT Sport, and the Piero screen that you saw there was being remotely controlled from, there was no equipment on site apart from obviously the cameras, and the only people on site were the camera operators, the presenters, and a small technical team. So we've been doing a wide range of remote productions.
Okay, Hamish, what about you guys? What's been going on at CTV?
I think we had the same kind of journey as Dan. Initially, when we came into lockdown and COVID impacted, we had to accelerate all the learning to make sure we can remotely control mixers, EVSs, get remote comms going, rack cameras, etc., how to actually work during the pandemic. When we ended up doing productions in people's garages and all the rest, and people's homes, front rooms, and then sharing it to the main broadcast partners and utilising it as part of their program making. And then obviously we had to make it safe for when we actually started working back on site. So then we had to bring in all the actual protective measures like the screens, the ionizers inside each room, the cleaning protocols, the COVID supervisor. We've got, we call the big artillery, the ozone generators, where every night it cleans completely, gives everything a complete cleaning of the area so it's completely contaminate free. And also we accelerated ourselves at CTV with Telegenica, part of EMG, and we built 3 galleries at our base, which we call a ROC, Remote Operations Centre, and that uses the same model as Dan when it's remote surface OBs. But similarly, we also built another gallery up at Salford for BBC Sport, and that one does either remote surface or complete remote, takes in signals and does complete remote OBs. It's always been in our plan to have remotes, but of course, no one's ever wanted to pay for it because it's got the added connectivity cost. So it's been fortunate that COVID's come along and accelerated the process, and now it's here. I think it's definitely going to be a thing to stay. But like we have to do a 1-camera live view from someone's front room or do a 100-camera host broadcast. Doesn't really matter. We, any OB company, and all the 3 companies here are in exactly the same boat. We have to be able to deliver for everyone, and that's our job. Whatever format, whatever style, whatever we can do to fit the production's technical specifications and obviously their pocket as well. That's our job.
Well, we saw the same thing a few years back, didn't we, where we had the move to EVS. Lots of people didn't want to move to EVS because it was expensive, so they stuck with VTs, and then there was the earthquake in Japan. Wiped out the ability to use VTs, and everyone had to move on to using the EVS. There seems to be these huge events that that kind of, unfortunately for a lot of people, move these things on. Daragh, what about NEP?
Very much echoing what Dan and Hamish have already said before. I think this has forced us all to be really agile and think on our feet. I don't think we've done any 2 productions the same over the last 6-7 months. I think previously we kind of had 2 or 3 main terms of you had your REMI or your remote production and your OB, and now I think that I struggle to put a name on all the different workflows that we do, because they literally are so different all the time depending on the requirements, and quite often you need to shift from one to the other very rapidly. We've had scenarios where government lockdown restrictions have changed as close as 5 to 10 days out from the event happening, and suddenly we need to remote out half the crew to a different location so they can get in and out. In terms of looking at kind of how we try to support our clients get back on, sports was one of the first things to kind of come back, and there was a great push from the public, and I think we saw that across the board, and we did all sorts of things. People working from presenting from home, production teams located at home with technical facilities and surfaces. I think one of the big things it has done is it's accelerated some of our existing plans, but also the adoption of things that people have been trialing. We've been through, generally you kind of look at a lot of these change management programs, and you have these ideas of shifting things to the cloud, and that'll be a 9 to 12 month project, and they kind of happened on a Thursday. Lockdown was announced on a Thursday, and by Monday we've suddenly adopted and we've gone live. So I do think I don't think we'd necessarily finessed it by the Monday, but over the weeks and months to follow, we've definitely seen a continual innovation along the way and huge amounts of improvement.
But engineers love that sort of thing, though, don't they? I think it's a challenge is always welcome, I think.
Absolutely. I think this has been, of the things to come out of this has been the ingenuity and the talent of engineers really getting to shine.
Yeah.
I sit in a commercial role, and I love having the clever conversations around innovation with our teams. But quite often you struggle because, we've already sold a solution for a period of time, and we need to get return on that investment, or, nobody wants to pay for that great idea, but how do you make money on it? And I think what's been really helpful is being able to go to the engineers with a problem, because they're great problem solvers at the end of the day, and seeing what's come out, and as I said, I think we probably have over 10 different sort of remote solutions. Right. The challenge is probably now understanding which ones do we take forward, into the future, and which ones do we leave behind us, or how do we merge them together to be a better ecosystem.
I think one of the great great changes that's taking place is engineers' reliance now on the internet. Before, we would have not gone near it with a barge pole. We'd have relied upon, we want connectivity, this is what we want, end of story. Now we've had to, through necessity, make use of the internet, whether we've even had to provide internet into middle of forest, to be able to achieve programs, etc. And some of the tools and transport systems are absolutely amazing, and they will continue into the future. A lot of our remote producers are sitting at home in their bedroom or whatever, and they're, we're streaming all the different streams for them, whether it's a reality show or it's a quiz show or whatever. The Unity comms and others are absolutely amazing when you consider that we wouldn't have touched it with a barge pole a year ago, and now we're very happy to use it. And so I think it's been a great learning curve in that respect.
You used to see it in esports, didn't you? And I think it used to, because they were used to transmitting their material in that environment, but we were used to having the big broadcasters who would never have used it. So I think, that's kind of unified the esport world and the traditional broadcast world there. It's that's been quite interesting. So it's been, sweeping changes. I think it still seems quite busy in the OB world. They're, whenever I talk to people, they're overrun. Whenever I've spoken to any unit managers or anything, So is it still busy? Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, the OB industry, as someone said earlier, with sports being one of the first things to return, has been very good. It's busy in a different way as well, in that large parts of the workforce aren't having to go to site anymore, which is we've been driving towards, the industry's been driving towards remote production for many years. We've been doing things like SailGP and WSL football, but now this has really increased that, and there is large benefits for it in terms of work-life balance and mental health benefits. And we're predicting over this season to save about 74% of our air flights. That's we think about 2 million air miles and 200 tons of CO2 just in a few events that you saw on those clips, like Formula E and Dubai Racing, where we're sending much reduced members. So there is big benefits that have come through it, not just because of the COVID and being COVID secure, but through both financial and environmental savings. So I think the remote production is obviously the way of the future. And yes, these 9 months have really accelerated it and moved it on along a lot further than we were at.
I mean, sustainability, as we all know, has been a buzzword for 2 years. We've been aiming towards it for 3-4 years now, and I think now is definitely with acceleration in remote OBs, it's going to become even more so, which is, I must say, is a great thing. And a lot of our new trucks and all that, we have solar panels, we have the lower carbon fuels and all that. So this is just another step on that journey, which I must say is, I think we're all very welcome of.
In addition to the environmental sustainability, Dan touched on it as well, though, around the work-life balance piece. Our industry is famous for burnout. There's so many people, that literally throw everything into it, and it's by its very nature, it needs 100% commitment and traveling around the world traditionally, and away from families and things like that. So that's very tough and puts a lot of strain on individuals. And as we look to kind of the next generation coming into the business, it's challenging, because we're sitting up against some of the, we're trying to tap into the same talent that, the tech giants, the cloud giants are also trying to tap into. And, the lure of a car park in the rain somewhere, whether it's a far-flung place or just down the M4, probably isn't as appealing once they actually get there the first few times. So I do think, over longer term, we've seen already that we've built a hub and spoke model, so we're deploying spokes in different locations, and we've placed in Manchester at the moment to minimize travel, allowing for our talent, crew, EVS crew, etc., to be able to travel more locally, not requiring as much tracking up and down the M4 and all over the country. So in addition to the environmental sustainability, I also think there's a huge amount to be said for being able to go home and see your family in the evening. We did a recent event, a half marathon event in Poland, and the director couldn't kind of finish with pace in Bracknell in the UK, and at the end of the event, he kind of stood up and was like, checked to see what time his flight was at, and then it was like, oh no, hang on a sec, and he was at home within an hour, and and was able to drop me a text later on that evening with his young baby sitting on his knee, and glass of wine in hand. And I do think that's going to be really important as we move forward, and I think that's going to be one of the big drivers of this change, in addition to the financial and the economic benefits.
So obviously that's a positive change. We heard in the last session from producer Gemma from Whisper. She said that the OB truck environment now is quite different, because obviously you have to have the social distancing, you can have less people on hand, and obviously producers have been used to that forever. They've got their graphics person next to them, the director is right in front of them. What ways have you found that your social distancing in OBs? Is there anything that you've done to kind of try and counteract that? And how have you been setting up the trucks so that they're safe, but also still, providing as much usefulness as possible? Hamish?
I think we're on about our 5th version of screens. I remember from the mid-March putting the first screens in the first 2 trucks to where we are now. And one of our very first jobs was, over the next 3 weeks, is look at what screens could fit into every different truck we have and what the requirements were. And of course, the requirements are completely dynamic, because all the rules and the understanding of COVID changed as we went along. So I think one of the key things, and I know what we find is much easier, rather than fixed screens on desks, it's much easier having ones that slide in over the desk, so that you can have at a distance, you can see the complete screens, the director, producer, and the operator can see all the screens, and you can still have that protection, and it's much more comfortable for your shoulder space and all the rest. And it's, believe it or not, it's easier to maneuver. But I'd say one of our biggest things as well, two elements. One is the ionizers, which are in every different production area or operational area we have. And on top of that is the actual protocols in place. I think that is the key element, that people have to wear masks if they're working inside. They have to have it. They have to come in. They have to wipe down. When they leave, they have to wipe down. The new person comes in, the exchange, the control on site, just to make sure that everyone does stay safe. And I say, in our big artillery, the ozone generators, I love them, because within 15 minutes to half an hour, everything is completely sterilized and dead. And yeah, we've got the UV and we've got all the other bits and pieces, but this is the bulk artillery. So, and say where it's for everyone's got similar, I would assume, similar tools, because we all know how to work safely in this environment now, which is key to us being able to continue working.
I think it's been quite interesting that it's true adversity that brings people together, and we've all said, Hamish, Dan, and I, we've all been on calls, in different forums where people are sharing ideas, and it's very much working collaboratively. I think that's been a real positive that's come out of this. It's shown as an industry, it is a share. We all rely on the same freelance crew. We were hiring kit, across to the different companies. So it's really important that we work in similar manners, and that I think from a freelancer's perspective as well. I was speaking to somebody recently, and I think initially the challenge was they had to do 7 different types of, safety questionnaires and different protocols, and the more we can standardize on that going forward as well, it means that we can have trust in our own people as they travel around, and regardless of who the OB provider is or who the broadcaster is, we know that they're coming from a safe environment, into our environment. I think that's quite powerful going forward.
Yeah, it has been a challenge in OB trucks, obviously, because we've had to reduce capacity, number of people who can go in them. As we've said, we've had to have screens and things like commentators and VO. We've had to separate them out, but we've tried to help them with cameras so they can still see each other as if they're together. Lots and lots of Zooms between people in OB trucks and in galleries, and just like basic things of how do we have production meetings. Production meetings used to be everybody on site or everyone in the broadcast center coming together in a room to share ideas, and obviously that can't happen now. So it isn't as good, to do a production meeting where no one is together, but it does work very, very well. And commentators, I think everyone is getting used to it. So it's just that we have to work currently.
I think there's a lot of innovation that's come out there as well, though, Dan, as you say, whether there are lots of Zooms, or I know we've been doing a lot of stuff with, traditionally where you'd have talent sitting side by side, and we now need to separate them out. So shooting them on green screen and having, then, in an AR environment, bringing them closer together. We've been doing lots of that. And, one of the other things that we've recently launched in one of our main hubs in the Netherlands is a quick testing facility, and I think we're going to see more of that coming in the UK soon as well. So we launched that, I think it was last week, and we were able to take the first 400 people through it in a week, and that sits kind of in a central media park. So we're now opening that up to other clients, and other people who are also working within the media park, not necessarily NEP customers, but other suppliers who are based out of there. And I think that's the sort of environment as well. So we're going to see collective, working together again to try and give people these sort of stamps of, clean bill of health, and, we can then move more freely between productions.
I think what's also worth mentioning is for ourselves, we work completely across Europe. So we had trucks last week in Austria, we had trucks in Cyprus, we're in the Middle East, we're everywhere, we're Spain, whatever, France, blah, blah, blah. But it's such a dynamic situation where all the rules change within 2 days. So all of a sudden you've got 100 crews somewhere, and then they're in a quarantine or they're in a bubble, for 2 weeks. So how to manage that situation, because there is only an infinite pool of freelancers and staff. So I think the whole it's been a very challenging situation in a sense, but it's been challenging but rewarding, because we've always managed to find a solution, which is the ethos of OBs really, and engineering. So it's a challenging time, very exciting time, and sometimes I wish we would just have more corridors. We don't have to bloody change everything at the last minute, make our life a lot easier. So please, going forward, we have more corridors, less hassles.
Okay, so this is quite a big question. Where is the demand for new OB vehicles coming from? Do we think that this will lessen the demand, or do we think things are going to go back to how they were before once there's a vaccine? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, within timeline, we launched a fleet of remote trucks in 2018, which have become very busy now. So they're the smaller style trucks that can do satellite fiber, 4G, 5G remote production. But I still think there is a demand for large scale OB trucks in the market, for one-off shows where you don't have permanent connectivity, things that don't. So I think the future is that there'll be a mix of remote working trucks, full OB trucks, big OB trucks being remotely controlled. So I think it's still quite an exciting time. And I think we'll be seeing outside broadcast trucks for many years.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to say, I think we're going to see a broader variety. I think, the idea of a truck always having, you've got your acquisition element, you've got your mixing element, and then your distribution. I think you're going to see that separated into different environments, and you'll have some trucks that are capable of doing everything. And then you've got other trucks that are built purely for acquisition only. So cameras, you might still have your shaders or your racks guys on site because you need to have some engineers there. Or you might you might have your audio mixer because she needs to mix it. Locally, you might have certain requirements there. But I do think we're going to see different types of trucks for different environments. Even to the point of, we launched a truck last year which has no technology in it per se. It's just control surfaces. And the idea is it connects back to a central data center. And you can deploy that because sometimes people still want to be on site, but we're now actually getting quite used to centralizing our technology stacks so we can share them across multiple productions and be in a multi-tenant environment. So I think there isn't really one size fits all anymore. And it's no longer the question is going to be how big or how small the truck is. I think there's going to be lots of different types and in between.
I think Daragh made a really interesting point there about the remote surface. We've just launched 2 huge trucks, triple and double expando, with a tender. A third truck is a tender, and in front of that's a data center. The other 2 trucks are complete remote surface, just for operator areas. So they're the biggest foot space we've got for people, and for amount of production areas and amount of personnel is incredible. But it's all the remote data center. The data center tender can be parked anywhere really, and just connects with 4 fiber cables. Thank you very much, and you got everything, complete redundancy, red, blue. But as Daragh also said, and the other guys, we have to supply everything where it's complete remote surface, remote OB, whatever, small truck, big truck. You have to be able to supply everything. And what we're doing is, rather than just now, because obviously money is tight, I think everyone's finding it's all been hit financially adversely by COVID, that rather than sort of investing in new remote trucks just now, I think what we would do is our smaller trucks, we're looking at converting or utilising as remote. And we'll see how that carries on until obviously different clients and different technology makes the requirements different. But as I say, we're just agile really, and that's how we have to be.
Hamish touched on a really interesting word, utilisation. I think that's probably the biggest. I think that's the biggest buzzword in broadcast over the next couple of years. You know, if you look at our traditional use of technology, we've been very poor at utilising our assets. You know, we deploy things into a truck, for example, a router or a vision mixer, or and it may get used once a week, or and we've been quite rigid in that space. And I do think by advances in technology, by advances in people's acceptance of technology as well, there's a reluctance to, how could I possibly vision mix a show in Manchester when, the core technology is sitting somewhere else in Europe and the OB is only down the road? How does that make sense? But we're now proving that with, resilient fiber links, using internet in some scenarios, that we can now separate out all those building blocks. And then the core pieces, which are the most expensive, your routers, your vision mixer crates, your audio mixing, DSP, all these types of things, you can leverage them multiple times throughout a week, even throughout a day, across different clients, different types of productions. And I think that's going to be the big industry driver over the next couple of years.
I think we all wish for a virtual world, don't we, where everything is connected and we can actually just utilize a resource from wherever we are, and therefore, and especially you've got 24-hour utilization then if you're working the other side of the world and you use the same EVSs and all that. I think that is everyone's final wish and ambition to make happen. But I think it's small steps initially, but yeah, we're definitely on that journey, let's say.
We're seeing a few audience questions coming in, and I saw a couple earlier actually, and they're about crew. So how this kind of remote world affects crew. Sid Coley has asked what your thoughts on diversity and inclusion opportunities are with decentralized remote productions, because obviously you'll have the ability to hire people from, like you say, well, you've got, vision mixer is in Belgium and the other person is, wherever. How is it affecting crew? Are you finding that it's meaning that you have to put less people, or that they're just in different locations?
I think recruitment and training can definitely be supported through remote. One of the challenges in recruitment and training, if you're primarily your big OBs are, all over the country, all over the world, it's a challenge to send people out who are necessarily surplus, to requirements. And we've done that traditionally to train people in, but sometimes it's quite hard to break in. I think there's more opportunities, with central hubs, for people to come in to shadow and do things. I think it's probably a little bit early to say, definitively, at least from my personal perspective, has it had any massive impact on inclusion and diversity? But I do think it opens up new possibilities and that we can all explore.
Yeah. I would say it has had, in its early days, but it has had benefits on inclusion, because some people who may not have been able to, take the Dubai or the Formula E, where you would have traditionally had to go on a plane, with your family, you've got young children, and you kind of take the decision not to be in that world now. Now, people have come into Ealing Studios, worked on Dubai horse racing, or worked on Formula E, or worked on Sail GP, the events in Australia, or it can be anywhere, and then they go home. And suddenly you now are being able to be included back in big host broadcast events where you're working from near your home. And I think, as Daragh and Hamish said, the future is definitely going to be more remote hubs. So rather, we've all been working from home, but it's not ideal and it's not a great environment to do live TV from. But if there's remote hubs where, if you live in Newcastle, you can go to a local hub and work on a Premier League football match that might be in Chelsea, and not have to travel. So I think it will over time, and it is already making OBs more accessible.
I think one thing worth mentioning as well, which was briefly talked about, was the mental health. we find it's too. Yes, it's brilliant for work-life balance. You know, people working from home, we all love it from the family aspect. However, what we've found is that with people working from home for the last 9 months or something, there's loneliness kicks in. You know, and what we found is also, because we've been working in a lot of bubbles, you know, the different elite sport bubbles and all that kind of stuff. And we found that younger crew have been very negatively hit mentally, because it's very unnatural to stay for 1 week in a hotel room, and you can't go to a bar, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't mix with other people. And if you're doing 2 or 3 weeks or whatever in that kind of environment, or going, whether you have a break or not, but you're going home and you're sitting in your house and you can't mix with your friends, etc., etc. So I think whilst there's massive impact and, you know, benefits, I think we have to be very aware of the mental problems that working from home can bring. And so for us, also for our office staff as well, obviously all the office staff are remoted. That was one of the first things everyone had to do. And then, you know, 3 days, 4 days, make the whole operation work from home. And therefore, it's really being aware of the mental impact that this can have on people, and help, which is what our job is. We're there to minimise these kind of issues, which are more prevalent in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, I find that even from obviously from a commercial point of view, I suppose, Daragh, you might think this as well. I absolutely, I don't like at all not being able to go out and see people or talk to people face to face, because I think that's the nicest way. You know, things come up in conversation, don't they? And it's just so much better, and it's definitely something.
You miss the camaraderie, I think. You know,
that we do in a creative industry. You definitely.
And the bar.
I think we've all been there. Like you do those 18. You know, yeah. The one saving grace was, you know, you do your 18-hour day at a Ryder Cup or something like that, as Hamish will tell you. You know, you do relish that. You know, meeting up for a drink at the end of the day. You know, and kind of putting the world to rights. And I can completely empathise with, you know, the scenario that Hamish describes, because you go back after that long day, tough slog in the rain, whatever it might be, and you go to an empty hotel room with, you know, your small travel kettle in the corner. It's not quite the same, you know. So I do think that's something we have to work on going forward, and trying to see how we can, you know, because otherwise we'll lose people. You know, burnout is a big thing we need to be careful of.
I don't think it's any coincidence that the OB session has been the only one to talk about drinking so far today, and how that has changed.
I have no idea how that came about.
Well, if this was an in-person event, you know, at this stage we'd be probably eyeing up the last session before the beers. So, you know, I'm just waiting for the doorbell to knock and the beer to arrive. Playing the Irish stereotype.
There's a couple more, and I'll have to be quick. I think we've got about 5 minutes left. Jack Willis, this question suits me. Camera technology is adapting to the changes as well. Have you found that there's been a trend to use more remotely operated cameras?
Definitely. Whether it's standard PTZs or whether it's full on, you know, smart heads, 100%. It's the separation, isn't it, that's needed? And, you know.
One of the big things that we did at the start of lockdown, and you saw a little bit in that video, was developed a bespoke app for an iPhone Pro, and we made kits that could be sent out to various presenters and football stars, and they can set it up themselves, and then we could have a fully controlled broadcast camera where we can control the pictures. We get a really high, you know, it's a totally different quality to Skype or something like that. And that proved a big thing that we've been using a lot, and have now adapted that to lots of other remote working methods. And we've added remote panning and tilting to that as well. So yeah, remote cameras in these lockdowns have been absolutely essential.
Yeah, I think we've been looking at that, and I think even seeing where we take it the next step further, where, you know, looking to see where we can use AI for facial recognition and skeletal tracking, so you can start doing, you know, your 1+3 studio chat. Do you actually need to have an operator at all, you know, or can that be driven autonomously? You know, and we've been looking at that type of technologies and seeing huge advances in that, and we've already been testing and deploying that in limited scenarios. And then I think, you know, when you take it on a small scenario and then you scale it up to your big 100, 200 camera reality shoots, that's when that sort of technology really comes into its own, you know. And again, if we're, you know, doing some of these big reality shoots around the world, if we don't, you know, if we can kind of streamline that environment of people more working remotely, we're not necessarily traveling a lot of people around to ultimately sit and look at a monitor in a porta cabin somewhere. You know, if they can be in a more comfortable environment, you know, closer to home, again, you know, we're seeing camera technologies really facilitating that. Latency is still the big challenge, though. You know, it's worth pointing that out. That, you know, latency, you know, is still the biggest thing, because, you know, when you hit that controller, how long is it going to take for the camera to move? And that's probably the biggest challenge, I suppose, we're facing right now in terms of remote deployment of PT sets. It's doable, but it brings some challenges.
Do you think that producers and audiences have become a bit more tolerant now that you have to use the internet, or you're having to think about things like latency? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think so, but I don't know whether it'll last forever. You know, I do sometimes. They should remain nameless, but a panel comedy show at one point was pretty tough watch in the early days. You know, as you waited 2 seconds for the laugh to happen, and you know, as you just see Hamish and I, we talk over each other. And there's only I do long sometimes for the, you know, the slickness of, you know, shiny floor broadcasts, you know, like where it just runs perfectly. But you know, we'll take what we're given right now, I suppose.
I think with all the virtual shows just now, I think is really interesting. You know, the virtual award shows and all that kind of stuff. The combination of, you know, AR, AI, VR, whatever, you know, and with your Skypes and your Zooms and your, you know, Media Looks or whatever, whichever video transport system you're using, display system. And I think the screens are coming of age now as well for the audience. Instead of having, you know, like a Zoom screen on a big monitor in the back or a big screen, you know, they're actually, the quality is getting massively improved, and the actual volume as well, and now they're looking at audio as well, because that was, to say, the biggest problem. What was the audio? No, I think like everything, it's a learning curve, isn't it? And when we started, we had rapid learning, and now we're just refining, I think, and I think it's ongoing. I mean, in OBs and engineering and production, we're all learning the whole time, and if we're not, we shouldn't be there.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to wrap up now, I'm afraid. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.